Hey everyone, welcome back to the Night Writer podcast. I'm very pleased to be joined by a special guest, Lucas Cantor. Lucas, welcome to the Night Writer podcast.
Thank you for having me. I
You,
deliberately did some spooky lighting for you.
Yeah, I know, thank you. And I've got a background just for you, so thank you. You are a composer, a producer, and a multi-instrumentalist, as I can see from your background. But also now you're an author and you're writing a story called The Prince of Venosa about a man called Carlo Gesualdo. And I just have to probably point out that when we were exchanging emails and we were talking about this guy, you said, "Yeah, I'm writing a book, a story about this musician who, killed his wife and her lover." And I was just like, "Wow, okay, tell me more about this story." So please tell us more about this story.
Well, so this is actually is an excerpt from a book that I'm writing about technology and the arts and the relationship between technology and the arts. And this story is in the book. Actually, the story might not end up being in the finished book. The story is currently in the draft of the book as a way to illustrate how the stories we tell about musicians affects how we enjoy their music. So, and that's why, so I've actually been interested in Gesualdo's music for a long time. And before I knew any of the details of his life, I really thought his music was interesting and strange because it is, and everyone should just go listen to, you can just Google Carlo Gesualdo and you'll find some performances of his music, but it is from the 14th, from the 15th century, when the prevailing style was madrigals. This was really right before Monteverdi functionally invented opera. And madrigals are just sort of sung poems, basically. And he was writing in a style harmonically that would be like if you heard one of his pieces at a modern university, you would think, yeah, that's pretty cutting edge. That's it sounds modern even today. And so he was writing music and using harmonies that were about 300 years ahead of their time. They weren't revisited until the middle of the 19th century. Which is kind of like if you found a half-finished draft of Michael Jackson's Thriller in the papers of J.S. Bach.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Comparison. Yeah. And so he grew up in a rich Italian family. He was the second son, so his brother was set to inherit everything. And he thought he was going to spend his life in the church, like all second sons do.
Yeah, so he was a quiet. Gesualdo was like the way that he's painted in the history that I've read is he was just kind of always a creep, right? But he was gonna be fine because he was the second son, and they were just going to send him to seminary where he would just study and become a priest and live in Rome and do things the priests did, write music and whatever.
Yeah.
And he just seemed like a very quiet type of guy who was really, that was interesting to him. And he was the nephew of Charles Borromeo, who at that time was he was some sort of second to the Pope. He was a front runner to the Pope. He was a cardinal of something or other. And Charles Borromeo is now known as Saint Charles Borromeo. So so Gesualdo was very connected in the Catholic Church. And so he was in Rome and he was studying, and he really took an interest in music and was looking forward to this life of quiet contemplation and musical exploration. And then his older brother died, leaving him the sole heir to the Gesualdo fortune in the town of Venosa. And so he immediately had to marry. So Gesualdo, I would imagine, was somewhat charming in his, weird, creepy way. Like think, Batman villain, maybe. So he married a woman named Maria de Avila. I'm forgetting her title. Yeah, there we go. So we'll just call her Maria. So he married a woman named Maria, also from a noble family, also very wealthy, and she was like she was a famed beauty of the day, like a Marilyn Monroe. Like everybody knew of her and how beautiful she was. And Gesualdo, I guess, had a sufficient fortune and was sufficiently charming to marry her. And they moved to to Milan. Is that right? They moved to one of the northern cities. Anyway, they moved up north. They moved to a villa and like a little apartment, and they hated being married, basically. They didn't really like each other. You know, it was probably an arranged marriage. And Gesualdo spent all of his time composing and just working on music. And Maria, was very outgoing. And Gesualdo would descend for, a few minutes, say a few weird things, and then go back to his office. And so she hated it. And she became friends. You need a, you know how it is. You need a friend who shares your interests. So she became friends with Duke Francisco, who was basically her counterpart, like famed for his Casanova-esque attractiveness. And they became buddies and just sort of social acquaintances. They would go to parties together, so on and so forth. And eventually Gesualdo started to suspect them of being lovers. And so he concocted this strange plot where he arranged with a friend of his to go hunting, but then he told his servant to leave his door open, to leave his door unlocked. So he left the house for a few minutes. And this is the old, like, oh, I forgot my purse. And then you come home from work. And so he forgot. So he arranged this, and then he goes out for an hour or so, and then he comes back with his friend, sneaks in through the open door, and hears the sounds of passionate lovemaking coming from his bedroom, which, so he sneaks up there. There are, daggers drawn, and they burst into the bedchamber, and they see Maria naked and Francisco de Carafa, for some reason that has yet to be explained, wearing her nightgown.
Right.
Yes, and they had clearly just finished the act, and so Gesualdo and his friend rush in, and Gesualdo's friend ran the Duke through with his rapier, and Gesualdo stabbed his wife with a dagger, to the point where her corpse was just completely mangled. So then they're about to, on their way out the door, they've killed these people, and on their way out the door, Gesualdo looks to his friend and says, "I don't believe she's really dead." And this is where it gets really weird. Then he ran back inside and just started stabbing at his wife's mangled corpse until his friend pulled him off. And then Gesualdo took the bodies of the two lovers and brought them to the street so that they could be further defiled by rats. And I didn't include this in the story because it's too weird, but there is an apocryphal story of a passing weird monk who was caught by authorities interfering with the body of Maria after she had been on the street for some time. So this is, anyway, that detail is very odd, but that happened. So this was all horrible, and Gesualdo went from being a weirdo to a murderer. But then there was the issue of the child, because they had an infant son, and Gesualdo was now not sure whether the infant son was his or was the issue of his rival. And so the story goes, and this is probably apocryphal, but this is what is understood, is that he hung the boy from a banister, like in a cradle, and played his music for him until the kid died. So he basically sat there playing music until his infant son starved to death, and then just left him there.
Starved.
So starved. Yeah, I think starved, because he didn't want to strangle him, but he also didn't want to. But he also couldn't let him live because he would grow up to seek vendetta. So
yeah.
So then Gesualdo fled town, because he was they were in the city at this point, and he went to his country estate, to his ancestral home of Gesualdo of Venosa, and the reason that he did this was not because he had broken the law, because he actually caught his wife and his lover in flagrante delicto, and so in the 15th century, it's perfectly legal to murder your wife if you catch her cheating on you. So he hadn't broken the law, but what he feared was reprisal from her relatives. So he went to his castle, and he cut down the trees all around. He cut down the forest around his castle so he could see an approaching army. And he waited there and for months, but they never came. So, and this is the point at which Gesualdo's story gets really interesting. um, so after a few months of waiting for his ex or his murdered wife's family to avenge her, they never showed up. And one of the reasons that he was unhappy with her and unhappy where they lived was that there weren't really great musicians for him to write for. And so he moved to another city in Italy that was famous for having a trio of amazing vocalists. And he befriended the Duke there, and he remarried. And this is when his music career really started to take off. So
even the other inconvenience, the first marriage, the inconvenience, all of that stuff. This one of my career is going to be made now. It's like,
so on the one hand, access to good musicians is important. On the other hand, the thing that changed in his music was that his music got really weird because he was haunted by demons, and he wrote a series of madrigals. He composed a book of madrigals. The most famous of which, the one that still survives, they all survive, but the most famous one is called Moro Lasso, and it's a very dark and extremely chromatic, and this is the one that you'll find probably the most easily if you Google Gesualdo. It's called Moro Lasso again. And
on your manuscript, on the where you can scan it and then it goes on YouTube. Yeah, because when you sent me, yeah. So I listened.
Yep, that's the one.
It is quite haunting. Yeah.
It's very haunting, and I'll read you the text. So he also, we don't know for sure, but it's highly likely that he wrote the libretto, and this is what it says. It says, "I die, alas, in my suffering, and she who could give me life, alas, kills me and will not help me. Oh, sorrowful fate! She who could give me life also gives me death." So, that's pretty creepy.
It's clear that he was quite kind of inspired by his past, so to speak.
Yeah, and this was his most famous work that he wrote, after he had murdered his wife. And so what I find interesting about Gesualdo, and the reason that I am planning to include him in this book, is that without the story, so there were worse murders that we've forgotten, and there has been also, weirder music that we've forgotten. But it's the combination of the murders and the fact that this guy's music was so weird that has made him still available to us almost 600 years later. So it's interesting how the narrative of this composer's life also enhances the life of his work.
Well, yeah, because when you were saying about, can you wanted to explore musicians' past and their backstory and how that connects to their music, I was thinking that when I listened to his song, I was actually, because I'd already know his story, I read the story, and I'm thinking in my head, oh, well, the reason why it sounds so haunting is because he did all these things, and he's probably a really haunted person anyway. Do you ever wanted to explore why he did what he did to his wife?
Well, there's a couple things there. So first of all, I listened to Gesualdo's music without knowing this story, and my first thought was that this guy's insane. So, just listening to it in the context of, knowing that it was from the 15th century, I just thought this guy was out of his mind. Like this was music from another time, and it would sound weird today. And it was very well done. It's good. It's good music. You can't take away from him the fact that he is an excellent artist, despite the fact that he was a horrible human being.
Aren't they all?
What's that?
They all, most of them.
No, I make the comparison I make is there are a couple of different. There are many different comparisons in contemporary society, and I'll use an older one, which is Wagner. Wagner was a known, loud, out and proud anti-Semite who just hated Jews, and he was Hitler's favorite composer. There's a story of Wagner's granddaughter meeting Hitler in person and saying to Hitler, "We've been waiting for you," when he was, I know, but you can't listen to Wagner's music and deny that he was a genius. Yeah, because he just was, so and you could say that about even a lot of the the artists that are artists and producers and whoever that have been caught up in scandals today, like, it doesn't mean that those movies weren't good. They're just horrible people, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. How do you separate the from the person is what people are trying to struggle.
Yeah. I mean, the other day, like, the other day I rewatched Good Will Hunting, and like, it's an amazing movie. It's a fantastic movie. But like, I forgot that Harvey Weinstein produced that movie.
I mean,
You know, like,
you won't be able to watch any movies in Hollywood in
right.
everywhere. Yeah, exactly.
So, so there is one in our society, especially, we are encouraged to view someone's personality and someone's life and their art as one thing, because the life is sort of the marketing tool to get to the art, because you want to feel like you know the artist. That's just how our society is. But those two things are not always, they're just not always the same, you know? Like, I feel like Dolly Parton probably is like an upbeat, nice, wise, talented person in person and on stage. I think that probably is just how she is all the time. But not every artist is like that. Some artists are brilliant when they're doing their art and are tortured human beings when they're not. And I wouldn't want to sacrifice the art of those people, but I also don't condone their behavior. So I don't know where that, I just don't know where that line is.
Yeah.
But it's a little easier when you're talking about Gesualdo, because Gesualdo's been dead for 500 years.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, at the time, he was never actually arrested because he couldn't. He did, according to the law, he didn't do anything wrong.
He didn't break the law. He wasn't a criminal. You know, it was legal to kill your cheating wife.
Yeah.
You know, and I certainly don't. You know, it's not hard to say that that's obviously a terrible law, but that was the law at the time.
Yeah. And also he fled to his castle and chopped down all of his trees. What did he think was going to happen if his wife or his in-law suddenly sent an army over there? What was he actually planning to do?
Well, they would have. I think they would have been justified in killing him, probably.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't know if there was a statute of limitations on vendetta or something, but there was. You know, that was just part of the honor culture of the Renaissance Italy, was that, you know, it wasn't unexpected, you know, or it wasn't unheard of that they would come take revenge on him. I guess they just thought better of it. And I think that there's probably some chauvinism there, because you know, she dishonored the family by cheating.
Yeah.
So, you know, well, I'm sure they loved her. They probably realized that legally and under the code of the times, they didn't really have a leg to stand on, even though he had killed her. So, I mean, that's just a guess. And there's scholars who I'm sure have figured this out. But that's my guess, is that they just didn't feel like, you know, I mean, obviously it's like uncomfortable for me to talk about it in this way, frankly, but it's but I think that's what it was that, you know, the morality and the legal details of that time were just, you know, abhorrent to us, but they were what they were at the time.
Yeah.
But so another interesting life that Gesualdo has led is as a bit of a cult figure. So his music was forgotten for a while and was revived by 20th century composers, and has really seen a renaissance in the 20th century, or had seen a renaissance in the 20th century. I sometimes forget that we're no longer in that century. But his music really saw a renaissance in the 20th century. And one of the historians who wrote about him started to believe that he was Gesualdo's reincarnation.
Yeah, I remember you told me this in the email, and I remember thinking, because this story can't get crazy enough.
Yeah. So it's and I, as an artist and a composer and a researcher and a writer, I actually completely understand this. That's what's scary about it, is that because Gesualdo was so disturbed, but also so brilliant and also so ahead of his time, it is easy to view him as a cult figure. And he is the kind of person that every young man who seriously embarks on the arts, and maybe every young woman, but I will speak for every young man who seriously embarks on the arts, like, secretly kind of views himself as like a tortured genius. He was a true tortured, dark genius. And I would not trade my life for $1 billion, but there is a, maybe when I was a teenager, I would have thought that he was a lot cooler than he is. And I actually I have 2 young boys now, and I have all these books about Gesualdo in my house. And I think that I don't want to show them to them until they're older.
Yeah.
Like until they're until they've graduated from college.
Yeah.
Because I think that this story is dangerous to young people.
Yeah.
Because he's so compelling. And I do encourage anyone listening to this to also listen to the music, because, and maybe you can put some maybe you can edit some into the video stream here. Because it's haunting, and it's haunting, and it sounds like it's from another time, but also kind of from today. And that makes him a really scary and compelling character. Like, if we found out later that time travel was possible and Gesualdo was a time traveler who got stuck in Renaissance Italy, I would 100% believe that. Okay. But it's because he just seemed like a man out of his time, which is how you feel if you're a tortured young artist. You feel like you're not in the right place or in the right time, and that no one understands you. But Gesualdo truly was someone that no one really understood. So
this historian, did he genuinely believe that he was Gesualdo, or did he just feel so connected to him? No,
he went to an asylum in the UK. I mean, it pretty much ended his career. So, and I haven't read enough of his work, but he was also a composer, and was prone to psychological issues before he started studying Gesualdo. So it wasn't just simply reading the story of Gesualdo drove him insane. I think he was already going down the road of schizophrenia or dissociative whatever, so some sort of disorder, and this story pushed him over the edge, or became a really convenient vehicle for him. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know how this stuff works, but yeah, there are stories of people thinking that they're the reincarnation of Gesualdo. The home of Gesualdo is like a macabre tourist attraction for a certain type of person. Werner Herzog made a movie about Gesualdo, made a short documentary about the house of Gesualdo, and he has some living heirs who are royal in Italy still, or living descendants, I should say. Yeah, 15th cousins or whatever, but they are Gesualdo's bloodline. They say that there is a bed that they say this is in the Werner Herzog documentary. It is, but they show a bed that this Gesualdo descendant says was the bed that he murdered his wife in. Yeah, and that they still have it. And there's in the Werner Herzog movie, there's a scene in an asylum in the city where Gesualdo's home was, where the head of the asylum says, I have several men here who believe that they're the reincarnation of Gesualdo, and I can't let them meet each other. So I have to keep them on separate parts of the ground. And his home is still standing. And so there is this, there are people who go in and will sing his music in his home. So
who owns the estate now, the Gesualdo estate? Is it his family still, and they let them in?
I don't know if it's, I think it's a privately owned building. I mean, I'm talking about the apartment where he murdered Maria. So the Venosa, I've never been to Venosa. I think it's in Tuscany somewhere. I'm pulling that out of my posterior, and so I've never I don't know where it is, but and I don't know if it's still called that or still a town, but the site is his apartment.
Okay. And his castle, I presume, has probably been in ruins, or that where he fled.
Say that again?
His castle,
what?
His ancestral home.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know, where the castle is. But next time I go to Italy, I'm certainly going to visit. I was in Italy a few years ago, but I didn't have time to sort of do a Gesualdo tour. But I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I think I got. Yeah, just go take some pictures.
Gesualdo, did he actually play his music in public, or did he just compose and other people played it?
Oh yeah, he was popular. Like he would be a footnote in music history regardless. You know, if he hadn't killed his wife, we would still remember his music because but I probably wouldn't have heard of it even. You know, like Renaissance scholars would remember his music. I might have. I mean, you know, I'm a musician. I might have come across it, but it would not have. It would not have generated the interest that it has generated now because it was simply atypical music of the period. But it wasn't. You know, it wasn't so outside the norm that that it was. It wasn't very popular. How do I put it? Like he was popular, but he wasn't like like Monteverdi popular. So like Monteverdi, so here's a good example. So Monteverdi and Gesualdo were pretty close contemporaries. They were around at the same time. They were in Italy at the same time. And they were both working with the source material of madrigals, right? That's kind of what the popular thing was at the time. And Monteverdi, or I'll start with Gesualdo. Gesualdo thought, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these madrigals and instead of using these simple harmonies that we've been doing for the last several hundred years, I'm going to make the harmonies and these chromatic lines just whacked out. And I'm going to make this beautiful, crazy out to lunch sound. And he did that, and the public was not quite ready for it. He had a little bit of a, you know, a following, but, you know, and people thought it was the kind of thing that, like, I don't know if anyone's been to college and been to like a conservatory concert. I think that Gesualdo's music was approached like, okay, that was interesting. I don't know if it was something I want to listen to, but that's because the stuff was really out. It was just out there. Like today, it sounds a little bit more tame to us. So Gesualdo played with the harmony, but left pretty much all the other elements of the madrigal intact. Monteverdi pretty much kept the harmony of madrigals the same, but he made elaborate changes in the staging of these concerts. He had one voice singing in a madrigal. The entire ensemble is singing as one voice. But Monteverdi thought, you know what, let's have some of these voices supporting and one of these voices singing a main melody. And Monteverdi also said, let me increase the size of the accompaniment. So instead of having just a you know, harpsichord or something, and you know, or an octet, I'm going to get a bigger group of musicians. What do I call it? Well, let's see. They'll sit down under the stage in that area that we call the orchestra. So let's just call them the orchestra. All right. So we'll get a larger group of musicians and call it an orchestra, and we'll tell a story. And so what Monteverdi did was change basically every aspect of the madrigal except for the harmony, and he created what we now know as opera by doing this.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So they were both searching for the same thing, but they just searched in different directions, and one of them became wildly popular, and one of them became a musical anachronism that is known to scholars today.
But is also a cult figure too.
Say that again?
Also a cult figure too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's ever gone insane thinking they were Monteverdi.
No.
But you know, he also wrote, you know, there's also, I mean, you could probably go to a major concert hall somewhere in the world and see a Monteverdi opera at any given time. You'll be hard pressed to find a Gesualdo concert.
Yeah. Although, I mean, when you kind of told me about the story, and then when I was reading it, I'm quite drawn to the humanity and the characters of it, Gesualdo in particular. Because when I was reading it, I was just thought, oh wow, that escalated really quickly, because he never really showed any affection towards his wife. He wasn't said to get madly in love with her. I think he did what he did. It wasn't really so much out of jealousy. It was just anger at being betrayed and being made to look a fool of. I was kind of, it sort of came out of nowhere. There was no, he never, because he was very distant from his family, and then it just kind of exploded. And then, yeah, I was just really interested in that kind of side of it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he might have been Monteverdi with the right partner. Yeah. You know, like he might have gone. I mean, like imagine with like support, you know, because the level of, I mean, I have a wonderful, loving, and supportive wife, and it is like, it makes my job is still very hard, but it is easier because I know I've got that support and, you know, all of that. But I would have to be so much better a musician and so much more determined to be doing what I'm doing in the face of a horrible relationship.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That
Yeah.
that he, you know, he was such a genius that, like, despite the fact that everything in his life was horrible to him, I think he was still able to create. And, you know, I can barely pull it together to do my best work, and I have all the support and the, you know, I've got the easiest sort of artistic life you can imagine, and I still find it difficult. And he had none of that. And you know, it's possible. I mean, this is just speculation, but it's possible that he was gay too, and
Yeah.
like that maybe, you know, he would have just been better off with the right partner. And I just say that because he was, you know,
I mean,
in the church.
yeah, yeah.
That's not fair. Um,
But, I mean, even though just a bit, that scene with the kid and the banister and him just playing his music, that's just really insidious and really sinister to think that far and then plan to do that. Even if he thought it wasn't his child or not, there was a possibility that it actually was his child. And why would you do something so cruel like that? I guess we're looking at it in terms of now, but back then, I don't know, do you have the same?
yeah, well, it's like the nicest way to murder a child if you don't want to do it in what is really the nicest way, which is to do it in the fastest way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, and I think that there is also, like, probably some psychological and maybe some legal aspect to, like, he didn't technically kill the child. He just
Exactly. He thought
arranged for the child to be killed. So,
he
you know,
that it wasn't legal what he did. It was just, he could have just been chalked down to neglect or something. Or, you know, in those days, infant mortality was, you know, it was.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess to be fair, like, you know, the chances that child was going to grow up are pretty low anyway.
Yeah.
But it's still horrifying. And, you know, I mean, I can't, yeah, I mean, that's the part of the story that really, I don't think I actually included that. Did I? I don't know if I, like, that might not make the book. It's too creepy. Like, you know, I don't, yeah.
This interesting thing, because I was going to ask you, would you consider writing it as a part of fiction, as from Gesualdo's point of view, or from his wife's point of view, or the Duke's point of view, or just?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really write fiction. And this is like, so this is a very small part of my book, and I just, like, thought that it would be awesome on your podcast, but it is not. I'm not like, I love the story of this, but, you know, the way that I write, what I try to do is collect as many stories like this as possible and use them to illustrate a point about, you know, reality rather than writing the stories for their own sake. But yeah, I think this is like, I can't believe that nobody has made this movie. I can't believe that, you know, this isn't like an HBO show, you know, but
Because that's what I like. This is what I do on my podcast. I just talk all about, like, urban legends, fairy tales, the meaning behind fairy tales, and a lot of that can be traced back to, you know, medieval times in Europe, all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I'm surprised that, you know, fairy tale was made out of this guy. I'm sure there might be somewhere if we dig hard enough, but yeah, it does seem very.
I don't know if I want to know the fairy tale based on Gesualdo.
All fairy tales are really dark. All the origin stories are really, really dark. So yeah, I'm reading them, like all of the Rapunzels and Snow Whites, you know, like poison, and they lock their kids in towers. It's just, oh yeah. So this is like,
but yeah, I have a little correspondence going with I won't name him because I don't want to call him out, but a scholar who specializes in this period in Italy and has written a book about one of the notable figures from this period that is like this thick. This is a man who knows basically every detail of what was going on in Italy during the Renaissance, and he hadn't really heard of Gesualdo. He had heard about him in passing. Like, he knew that he was a composer who lived during that time, but he hadn't heard this story. So yeah, it's not widely known, but it is, you know, people have written books on it.
and I suppose finally, what do you hope that people will take from his story and the story that you're writing about him?
In the context of my book, the entire purpose of sharing the story of Gesualdo is to illustrate how the narrative surrounding music helps create a life and a space for the music to exist, and how no music exists in a vacuum. And if it did exist in a vacuum, you probably wouldn't enjoy it as much. So
And
That's the whole purpose. There's no moral purpose to me, including Gesualdo. I frankly put it in the book because it's so shocking that I just think if when you're reading a book about like philosophy and art and all these ethereal concepts, I think it's nice to have a good old down to earth murder every once in a while.
yeah, everyone needs a good old murder.
You know?
Lucas, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll put all your links and everything in the description below so everyone can check it out. And let us know about like when the book's going to be released. Is there a date or is it still a work in progress?
I'm still working on it. So I'm right now, the proposal is out. It's, my agent is shopping it. We expect to hear back pretty soon. And hopefully I'll have a manuscript in by next year. So, keep your eyes peeled. It's going to be a little while. I would say fall of 2022 would be the absolute earliest that it would come out.
Okay.
But hopefully it'll come out after the pandemic is over, and I'll do a little book tour, and everyone who's watching this, I'll come to your city and we can hang out. It'll be great.
I'm glad to interview you first.
What's that?
I'm glad to have interviewed you first, being one of the first to interview you before you go on tour.
Yeah, I don't talk about the book that much, so this is probably my first interview about the book. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And I also write music, which is what my main job is. But if anyone wants to know what I'm up to, Lucas D. Cantor on Instagram is the easiest way to just find me and connect with me. And my website is lucascantormusic.com.
Yeah, I'll put those links as well in the description as well, in the YouTube video.
Sweet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. I'll see you in the next one.